I think a lot of people, when they go as tourists, the mistake that they make is that they think they know the country because they've been there. But, cultures can't be understood that way. Just because you're a tourist, just because you've been there doesn't mean that you know about the country or the culture. Cultures take a lifetime to understand and learn.
Welcome to Locales Unknown. This podcast gives you the tools you need to choose your next travel destination and the tips you want to be able to explore like a local. Here are your hosts, Chris and Winfield.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to our episode with Charendra. He's truly an inspiring individual, lived all over the world as an international aviator, has some fantastic experiences both on the road, in the air, over land, over sea. And today we really unpack some of those adventures and he gives us some insights into regions that might not be as discovered as others.
Yeah, this one really made me want to Google a couple different job opportunities out there because I think this guy really does live the adventure. And that's something that I know I do and several of our other listeners aspire to do. So really cool interview. Can't wait for you guys to hear it.
So without further ado, here's our interview with Charendra. Hello, everyone. Today we are here with Charendra Dahanayake. He's an international aviator, a renowned adventurer, and just a down-to-earth gentleman. So how are you doing today?
Not too bad. And yourself?
I'm doing well, thanks. Can't believe it's been 7 years since we were hanging out at the Cinnamon Grand in Colombo. Time flies.
Unbelievable,
huh?
Man. Yeah, 2012, 2013. I can't believe it's been that long. And I want to make a correction about my introduction. I'm not a renowned adventurer. That's an overstatement for sure.
You're too modest, good sir. But in any case, you're really kind to come on and join us today. And we're just trying to gain a bit more insight because you have been all over the world. You've been in the Middle East. You were in South Africa for a while. You have quite a few stories and insights to share. So why don't you start things off with just a bit about your origin story, your background, and what inspired you to undertake these new adventures?
Well, I think the travel part of my life, I think it actually started by fluke. When I say fluke, it was not intended. It was just a means to an end. It was a stepping stone for me because I was looking for ways to fund myself for the pilot training that I wanted to do since I was like a teenager. And one day my father saw an advertisement on the paper saying that there was an opening in the Middle East for cabin crew positions in a Middle Eastern carrier. So I applied for the job. Eventually I got it. And 4 years later, within the span of 4 years, I think I ended up traveling to 60 to 70 countries. 66 if my memory serves me right. Yeah, it was action-packed because in such a short time, 4 years, too many countries, I think over 100 cities. Some of the travel was very brief visits, but some of the travel was quite extensive. So it's a nice thing to happen by fluke anyway, to anyone.
Indeed. No, but most definitely. And that's just quite, because you're always on the go and you don't really have time to explore the places, and you're with a crew of people. You get to interact with them. So that in and of itself is a different viewpoint of just going there as a tourist and having a holiday and just kind of staying back, right?
For sure. I think a lot of people, when they go as tourists, the mistake that they make is that they think they know the country because they've been there. But, cultures can't be understood that way. Just because you've been there doesn't mean that you know about the country or the culture. Cultures take a lifetime to understand and learn. And there are things about my own culture that I'm still learning. I've born and bred in Sri Lanka, but there are things that I'm still learning. So just because you've visited somewhere, it doesn't make you an expert. Just because you've got a DSLR camera doesn't make you a photographer. So yeah, the best part is that in my previous work, I got to work with so many nationalities. Like you name it, I've got a friend from any country that you can pretty much name on the world map, because it was so extremely multicultural working environment, and it was very nice for me to get to know people from different cultures, not just on a professional level, but on an intimate level as well, like friends, just and not just a one-off, not just for one instance. I mean, just continuously to know them intimately. So I'm still learning, and I love it, and that's the whole point of travel: the difference, diversity.
Indeed, and that's something that Chris and I talk about quite a bit, is humility and going into new cultures and trying to make sure that you come in with an open mind and that you don't impress your values or your ethics or whatever it may be on a new place, because you're there to soak it all up. You're there for immersion, to learn about a new culture and a new human condition.
Absolutely. I think another mistake that people make is that they have this tendency of measuring and comparing countries. Yeah, sure. Like, for example, if you ask me, there are, by the regular social standards or development standards or whatever, like there are good countries and bad countries that I've been to, but I wouldn't really call them that, because as soon as you label them that way, I think you're blocking part of the experience. I think one wouldn't truly appreciate good without bad and bad without good, right? So why compare? Why you're there to experience it? You're not there to. You're there as a traveler. Why unnecessarily take on the burden of the problems of the citizens of that country by measuring and comparing? That's not required as travelers. You're there to experience the difference. Yes, like for example, different cultures have different ways of doing things. Yeah, sometimes, like there might be more effective methods of doing the same thing. But unless you want to constructively help them, one should not compare. The difference is exactly what we want in travel.
I think that's a great point. And you're right, Winfield. We talk about this quite often. And I feel it's very difficult for a lot of people to not go to new places and look through the same lens as they look when they're at home. And that's where that measurement and comparison comes from, instead of looking from the other side, understanding that this is a completely different lens and a different way of doing things. But there's only a certain number of industries out there, yours being one of them, where you get that immersion and exposure in a professional setting. And that's something that is very unique, where as a tourist or a traveler, you can immerse yourself as much as you want, or you can take a step back and just look at the beautiful sights. But there's not an end goal objective where you need to gather together, put your differences aside in the overall ambition and objective of reaching that goal. So that has to be a unique experience in and of itself, to deal with the cultural differences, all for trying to meet that end objective.
True, yeah. Recently I was reading this book recently. It was introduced to me by one of my friends and also my brother. A very good learning point I got out of that book is to just observe stuff without trying to give it any interpretation. Enjoy the moment without trying to interpret it. Like understand it. Just observe, silently observe, and that gives you so much satisfaction sometimes,
No, you're exactly right. And that's so hard to do as humans, because we have all of our subconscious bias, right?
Yeah. But, you got to really train yourself over the years to let go of that ego,
Tell myself that every day, and just got to check the ego at the door. But so let's drill down into Sri Lanka a bit. I mean, the pearl of the Indian Ocean, roughly 22 million people. Really delightful country. I didn't know too much about it prior to visiting, and obviously, unfortunately, a place that's had some headlines that are obviously unsavory. But there's a lot to unpack there in terms of the beaches and the culture. And there's such a diversity of landscapes. I remember Kandy really stood out to me. Anandapura, I probably mispronounced that, so apologies.
Anuradhapura, yeah.
Anuradhapura,
Yeah.
there we go. Thank you.
Not a problem, man.
For you, it just rolls off the tongue. Jaffna was actually one of my.
I'm a native.
Jaffna was one of my favorites. It was really, really different. I remember I took a overnight bus from Colombo, 14 hours, which was an experience in and of itself. And got off the bus first thing in the morning. It's, bright and super hot out. And I'm just walking down this dirt road. Cows are meandering, completely roaming freely. And people are looking at me like, what's this guy doing in the middle of this village? I thought to myself, this is Jaffna. Okay, I'm here. It's 5 a.m. I'm walking around with a big backpack and I stand out, but I'm loving it because I'm in a different milieu and I'm embracing the atmosphere.
Yeah, I think 2012, when you were here, 2012 or 2013, it's not long after the end of the war. So Jaffna wasn't really open for tourists or even locals for that matter back in the day because, like most of the war was actually concentrated in the northern parts of the country. So maybe it took you 14 hours. I think it takes much less now with the road developments and everything, because it's been more than a decade since the end of the war. Yeah, Sri Lanka is, man, I think Sri Lanka has so much potential. I think in terms of its natural beauty, I think it's up there. I wish the country was, I'm not going to get too much into this, but I definitely wish if the country was managed far better than it has been over the years. But if that was there, I think Sri Lanka has the potential to be a first world country. I mean, it's very beautiful. There are so many things that I love about Sri Lanka. Well, it's like this, even in your own country, sometimes the chances are the tourists might have explored my country more than me because, sometimes when you're a native, you take it for granted. And it's always there, that place is always there. I can go anytime. And eventually you end up not going. So there are so many places like that in Sri Lanka that I have to explore myself. But yeah, man, these things are quite unique and subjective as well, the interests of a country. I like, the history of countries, the geographical landscape and the cultures, the food, the natural wonders, the ancient architecture, that type of stuff. So I think Sri Lanka actually gives all that. The known history of Sri Lanka is about 2,500 years old. That is the known history, and they keep on digging up, things before that. And even the ancient architecture, it's really surprising, for a country that is developing right now, actually achieved so much back in the day during the time of our ancestors. I want to get into the history of the country more on a more educated perspective as well. Now that I'm back in the country, because as a kid, I've visited these places. I've just seen the places, and that was the end of it. But now I want to learn more about the places, how they built it. And everything, and the more I go deep into it, the more fascinated I become. I was reading about the irrigation. I've got an interest about the irrigation network of old Sri Lanka, and it's quite extensive. I mean, for a country that is about 65,000 square kilometers. I mean, I think they say that we've got 30,000 lakes in the country, and
wow.
And the irrigation system, and most of them are man-made, and they're quite extensive. I was reading about this canal system called the Yorda, which translates to giant canal. I mean, it was, I think, built in the 4th or 5th century or something, but they somehow managed to maintain a gradient of 10 centimeters per kilometer or something. That's quite fascinating, how they achieved that type of engineering in the 4th or 5th century. So there are many things like that. And also another attraction for me about Sri Lanka is the waterfalls. I think we've got the highest waterfall density in the world, like I said, because of the confines of the country. More stuff are packed in a small area. So I think there are close to 400 recorded waterfalls in the country, which is quite something. And 27 or 29 national parks. So yeah, there's... If you like the history, if you're a nature lover, yeah, Sri Lanka is definitely a place to put in your list.
No, definitely, and there's so much to see and do, as you just alluded to. And I remember one of my really, should we say, off the beaten track experiences, and that's kind of an overused catchphrase now, but something that really stands out in my mind even to this day, was visiting a Hindu temple in Jaffna and receiving the blessing right in between the forehead. And
Yeah.
entering. You actually have to enter without your shirt on, or it's suggested because you come in as your own. You're in your, I want to say native form, but without any, as we were talking about earlier, any preconceptions or anything, without any clothing that's of this world, and that was very interesting. Just kind of wear a sarong and enter, and it's the origin story of the world according to Hinduism through various murals and no shoes, of course. Really, really interesting because I don't think that I would have experienced that really in any other, I mean, few places in the world. So I know, as you were talking about earlier, Jaffna's kind of it's been rediscovered now since things have improved there. But that really stood out to me, and I can still remember to this day my tuk-tuk driver bringing me there, and he actually went in for a blessing as well, because I told him, I said, I want to see what this is all about. Can you take me there? And he said, oh, okay, well, I'll stop by and pray, and I'll have one of the Brahmins show you around. So in terms of going back to what you were saying, the tea plantations, that also stood out to me quite a bit. Beautiful rolling hills, really lush, had quite a bit to see and do. There's one of the very popular tours as well. You alluded to the topography, 400 odd waterfalls. A lot of hiking to do, and also a lot to see on the eastern side, which I didn't get to as much. It's a little bit further away. Western side's mostly beaches. What would you recommend to somebody who just landed and doesn't have a set itinerary for the country?
Yeah, the East Coast opened up after the war as well, at least for the most part. East Coast, in my opinion, if you really want to go for the beach experience, I think the South Coast and the East Coast would be the best. But if you want to do some windsurfing and kite surfing, that type of stuff, we've got more wind on the West Coast, and that's where you should be, in areas like Kalpitia. Mm-hmm. Well, we've got beaches like we're an island after all, so we've got beaches everywhere.
Right.
I don't know I'm not really sure how long the shoreline is, but for the most part, like any beach that you can go to, and we've got like jungle beaches as well. Like you have to go through, like trek through a little jungle mangrove type of setting to get into the beach, and those are quite interesting as well. I'm not like a extreme beach person myself. I think I'm more attracted to the mountains. And speaking of tea plantations, my dad was actually a tea planter. He was planting for 25 years, and so was my grandfather, and he was a tea planter as well. Yeah, I think my father must be disappointed with us, not for continuing that legacy. Yeah. But yeah, it's quite nice. Like I grew up in Colombo, but for the school holidays, I remember we always going to the tea estates and going to the bungalows up there and living with my dad, and it was definitely one of the highlights of my life. It's very beautiful up there. Waterfalls, misty mountains, lots of trees, lots of green, a lot of rain. It was quite something. But eventually, like after retirement, I actually want to get into the tea industry as well. I've actually thought about it because it's quite fulfilling. Like I highly believe in passion. I think people should only do what they're really passionate about, and there are certain things that I'm passionate about, and I'm adamant about following them. I can't do anything else.
No, indeed. And that's a perfect segue into going back what we were discussing earlier about your adventures on the road. You mentioned 66 countries, and what's life like being on the road that much? Does it get to be stressful? Is it overwhelming? Is it just go, 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 and every day I'm in a new place and I'm just soaking up what I can soak up of it? Give us listeners some insight into what your feelings were about that, please.
Well, in my experience as a member of the cabin crew where I did most of my travel, I did some leisure travel as well because it was quite easy for us, given the staff discounts and everything. But yeah, it was It got a little overwhelming toward the latter part of my career as a cabin crew member because, it was a repetition of what I've done before. But the first couple of years, everything was new, and I was like over energetic about discovering places and exploring as much as I can. And it was exhausting towards the latter part only because I've been to all those places. But in the first couple of years, it was absolutely magical because every place that you go to is brand new. It's a brand new experience for me, and that experience itself energizes you even more to explore. And it's something I really enjoyed. I would do that again any day because it is tiring. Traveling is tiring because it takes a lot out of you because you're physically exerting yourself and also mentally. But at the same time, that experience itself is fulfilling. It refills your tanks up. So that's what it was like that for me.
Right. And finding that balance is tricky, right? Because I know for me, I sit and I think about, oh, well, when I was in this place or when I'm going to that place. And I think back to when I was on the road constantly and I loved it. But as you said, you eventually burn out, right?
So, you do. We're human after all. So
right. So finding that balance is tough.
It's also,
I know Chris has some experience with that.
Yeah, and we were talking about this before we started recording, Winfield and I, how when you look back and you see that you've been to all of these places, do you find that it just blends in? Some of them, sometimes I have to go through my pictures to say, oh, okay, that's where that was. And that was the experience I had there, because everything is just a mashup, especially as time passes. You look back and you say, 100%. Oh, yeah, I had an amazing memory. And then someone else will correct you and say, don't you mean in that country? Like, yeah, okay. Did you find that it was difficult to kind of each experience, separate it?
It does happen for sure, because there are similar countries as well, right? Like, for example, I've noticed, like, when I go to Southeast Asia, like countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia, like there are certain similarities that you find. I'm pretty sure, like, the same thing will be found if one of you guys would come to South Asia, my part of the world. There are certain similarities. Sometimes you get mixed up with the experiences, but there are distinct differences as well. It's just that you're overwhelmed with the amount of information and the experience that you've been getting. And it's sometimes, like you rightly worded, it mashes up, But but the fun part is when it's uncluttered eventually, there's like a very satisfactory feeling, like, oh, it was there.
Eureka moment.
Yeah, exactly. You solved the mystery in a lot of ways too. I've always wondered when you do have the time, obviously everyone is stopping in the same location, whether it be only for a few hours or more of an extensive period of time. Did you find yourself keeping with the group and generally doing more group activities, going out together, or is this more of a solo time where you got to?
That's the thing. Yeah, that's a really cool question. So the brief visits I was talking about, it was mostly group-based. But the extensive travel was actually with one or two friends max. Because I think if you really want to absorb, because you can't really control the needs and wants of your group, what they want out of their travel experience. I mean, some people travel just for, shopping or whatever. I'm not that type of person, so I want to get a max out of it, so sometimes you have to adhere to the group norm when you're with a group, but that's why, even when I make brief visits, I think to myself, man, I want to visit this place again. And if I decided that, I would come there again solo or with one or two friends max, because that's when you actually can do what you want and get the experience that you expect to have out of that travel. Otherwise, it's going to be a waste, when going with too many people, people get sick, people want different stuff. So I really recommend, what they say, right? Keep your friend circle small and your beers chilled. And I really believe in that.
There's the tagline of the episode. You nailed it on the head.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's such an important point, though. Definitely when you're in that group setting, even if you have it planned where you're doing a group activity, you may or may not be interested in it. But even during that experience, what if you want to stop for a little bit and explore, or take a picture with that DSLR camera, or just breathe it in, really, and take in your scenery. Unfortunately, you're at the mercy of a schedule and a group, which kind of takes away from traveling to begin with. So the fact that you were able to look around, see whether or not you like the taste of an area, and then put it on the list to get back to in order to really soak it in is probably the best approach that you can have in your scenario.
Definitely.
For sure. 100%.
Where has in terms of your travels, what's really stood out to you in terms of whether it's culturally or a specific place? What do you recommend, or where would you go back to visit towards the top of your list?
Well, yeah, it's a really tough question to answer because it goes back to what I said before, like the difference of experience is actually what I appreciate. Mm-hmm. And I like it all. Even, like I said, like by the regular standards, like if I go to a, bad country or whatever, I still like it because I like that difference. That's what I want, exactly. But if I really have to give you a straightforward answer, I think I would say Japan and Italy. Just off the top of my head, that is, and there has to be maybe a subliminal reason why those countries just came off the top of my head. The Japanese culture is really something, hey. I think they are definitely, undoubtedly, the most respectful people I've ever seen in my life. They are extremely down to earth. They're so clever. Are you guys still with me, or because I think I've lost you both?
No, we're here.
We can hear you.
Okay. The Japanese culture, overall, the beauty of the country, the culture, and how they manage their country, and everything about Japan fascinates me. I was there for about a month because my cousin used to live there, and Japan could be quite expensive if you're like a low-budget traveler. Especially the lodging and everything. Luckily, I had my cousin living there at the time, so I was able to travel the country with them and stay with them. So I actually went not all of Japan, obviously, because Japan is a large island or a set of islands, but certain places like historical places like Kyoto. Kyoto is a beautiful, beautiful city. It's my favorite place in Japan. There's in gardens and everything about Japan, their culture, their history really, really fascinates me. Even their food and even their beer, really good. Sapporo, oh, what a brand.
No, my late father lived in Japan for 27 years. Oh. He actually passed away there, and my stepmother is Japanese, so I have a little bit of background with Japan. It's a truly spectacular place, as you alluded to, and basically a lot of people. It's still undiscovered for a lot of people, but it's kind of like an onion. You peel back a new layer every time you go because you learn something new. You learn why. There's always a why. Why this place is here? Why is it there? Whether it's for feng shui purposes or for something of that nature, or for Zen. Of course, a lot of strong Shinto influence. So it's truly something that it takes a lifetime to learn as an outsider. And even for Japanese, they learn something new every day, it seems.
Yeah, and also the language barrier, like in Japan, most of the stuff are actually catered for the locals. And like even when you go to certain stations, even the name of the station is actually written in Japanese. So you need to speak to the people, interact with the people, but they're so helpful. That's what I like. Sometimes they would just go out of the way just to show you where I need to be going. They would just come with you with no expectation at all, just to be nice. They are truly special people. You don't see that to that extent in other countries, in my experience. Japan really stood out, and Italy as well. Like Italy is like, it's kind of like it's like they've got so many subcultures. Like if you go to the north of Italy, if you go to Rome, if you go to Sicily, the cultures are quite different. It's like you get multiple experience because they're so diverse in their country itself. And even the architecture and everything. I was actually walking in the streets of Rome. I've been there a few times, and even the sculptures and everything, you can actually see the eyelashes in those sculptures. So detailed, and their history, obviously, needless to say. So, I think those two countries would stand out the most. But this is not to say that the others I've visited are any less.
I always find it interesting when you can hear everyone's unique experiences about various countries and why they like it. And I have to say, Japan has always been shared and remembered in such a positive light. I've yet to hear a negative experience there. I myself have not been, but just from what I've understood and seeing everything as far as the natural beauty that it does provide, it's very much at the top of my list to get to. I myself have family and friends in Italy, so I know exactly what you're talking about. That attention to detail just goes throughout their entire culture. They are beautiful people for sure, and it's a magical place. And both cultures are very much ingrained in motorcycle culture as well, and beautiful designs. And it's my understanding that you're a motorcycle enthusiast. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, I had a little 250 Scrambler. It was nothing substantial, but I think it served the purpose for my stay in South Africa because I lived in a farm town, small town, extremely beautiful. It's called Swellendam. You should definitely look it up and even visit there. It was the highlight of my South African stay. I've been to South Africa. I've been to different places in South Africa before as well, but I was lucky enough to settled for 2 years in Swellendam. It was really quite something, and you get a lot of gravel roads there, and the only bike that would serve you is a Scrambler, and it's also easier with, like an ideal would be a 250 or a 400 or something, like, because if it's too heavy on the gravel roads, I mean, if you slip, it could be dangerous, but a 250 served me just right for Swellendam, for the gravel roads, yeah. So Winfield told me that you're a motorcycle enthusiast as well.
I am, yes. So I have a 750 Harley Street Rod over here.
Oh,
no
nice.
gravel roads around where I am in Florida, but still, it's very much enjoyable and freeing just to hop on the bike and enjoy. I think I got my first taste of it when I was in Southeast Asia, and that everyone's on a scooter there. So I think 250 was the max that we did, and that was only because we were in Bali at the time. And we were going up to the Mount Batur region, and those were some pretty steep hills. And unfortunately, we decided to do it without Google Maps, and we ended up in the high country. And we're very fortunate that we had that extra power because we were going up some pretty steep cliffs. But just being on the scooter, enjoying, and being able to feel everything around you rather than having the windows and the overall barrier of the car is a totally different experience, and I was hooked.
Absolutely. I mean, because you're into this, you should definitely make a trip to South Africa because they've got a crazy motorcycling culture. I mean, every time you step out on the street, you'll see so many Harley Davidson 883s and the Honda Africa Twins and the BMW GSs and everything. So they've got a pretty strong motorcycle culture there, and a touring motorcycle culture there. And actually my bike broke down at one point as well. So it was being repaired for just less than a week. And one of my friends, she actually borrowed her motorcycle to me. It was a XT 660. And it was a crazy upgrade for me from a 250 to a 660. And I was riding it. It was also a Scrambler. I was like, man, this is so powerful. I mean, this is the type of power that corrupts people, like I really enjoyed it. And also because the town I was in, it's called Swellendam. So it's nestled under a mountain range called the Langeberg, which literally translates to Long Mountain. I think it's about 170 kilometers, 200 kilometers long, that entire range. And I had to really converse myself with the topography of the area because I used to fly there. You can't just go and fly in the mountains. There are passes to get to the other side of the mountain. And one of the passes that I really loved riding through is called the Trudeau's Pass. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely enjoyable. It's a completely different experience when you're on 4 wheels and 2 wheels. It's even better when you're on 2 wings. Yeah.
So much to unpack there because South Africa, amazing country. I went there back in 2014 and really loved it. You were in the Cape and that region. Of course, there's so much to see, and also the Gauteng, Durban, Kruger. It's such a myriad of landscapes throughout the whole country. So why don't you give us a little bit of background about South Africa and how you ended up choosing South Africa for aviation school?
Yeah, South Africa is definitely one of the countries that I'll visit over and over again because that country has so much to. I've got a personal connection with South Africa, with the landscape, and also with the number of great connections that I made there. My flatmate, my first flatmate when I was in the Middle East was South African, and he already had a pilot license. He had a private pilot license. And I went there to the Middle East with a dream of becoming a pilot as well. So he and I became very close friends. And, so I've been to his parents' place in South Africa. I know them on a very intimate level, on a very personal level. So, I was looking for places, just as I said earlier on in the conversation as well, I was looking for multiple places to get started with my flying license because I was in the industry and I was getting so much like a surplus of information in terms of where to get this done. So I was thinking about Greece, I was thinking about USA, I was thinking about Australia, England, Czech Republic, Hungary, so many places. So I actually, because of the industry that I was in, it was easy travel for me to go to all these places and check out for myself. And I was telling myself, I really want a brand new experience. I'm going there for a considerable amount of time, 2 years average. So why not make a hell of an experience out of it? So South Africa really spoke to my heart because it's a very wild place. And the best part was, I knew the country was wild. And the best part was that when I went into South Africa and especially in the countryside, I made friends with the locals. And I realized that the people were just as wild as the landscape, they were really raw, naturally adventurous people. And I connected with that so much. And I fell in love with that place in a couple of months itself. And it was really something flying over Africa as well. As part of the training, you're going to do long cross-country flights as well. So at one point, I had to do a 1,000 nautical mile cross-country over South Africa. That's about just under 2,000 kilometers. It's 1,852 kilometers. It was a long 2-day flight. And I flew from Swellendam, which is in the Western Cape, all the way to the East Coast, just under Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. There's an airfield called Port St. John's, which is on a hill. And the only thing on the top of that hill is the airfield itself. And as soon as you take off, it's like an abyss. And coming into land, it's just on top of a cliff as well. So it was one hell of an experience. I got loads of pictures and videos going in and coming out of there. And after that, I flew along the coast back down to Swellendam, which was another experience in itself because South Africa is known for whale watching and dolphins and great whites and all that stuff. So I've seen so many hump whales and the southern whales and dolphins while I fly low along the coast. And low flying is another experience, high flying, you get to see a greater area, but low flying is actually when you feel the speed of your aircraft and you can actually relate it and you can see better what's on the ground as well. So it was really something. and the South African friends I've got, they're just up for anything, any adventure. Man, should we do this? Yeah, man, why not? I mean, is that even a question? That type of attitude.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I really loved it. Especially, flying back along the coast was really something. And also there's a mountain range called the Drakensberg, which I saw on the way to Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, Port St. John's, just under. Drakensberg is a really, really beautiful mountain. It's called Dragon's Mountain, which makes complete sense to me because that mountain actually looks like a dragon. It's very rugged and it's very dragon-like. Yeah, and seeing that for the first time was really something. I've spent about a month in the Himalayas as well, and seeing these magnificent places of nature is actually a very humbling experience. Like when I saw Everest for the first time, I've seen it, in the plane as well when we flew over those places, and also I've seen it from ground as well. And when you see that, like all the sounds just blocks out in your head, and you're 100% in the moment, and you're like, wow, this is it. I'm actually seeing it. I can only imagine what it feels like a person who's actually been on top of those places. I mean, they must be feeling like they actually conquer the world.
I absolutely love that. I myself have done the Everest Base Camp trek, and as soon as you were talking about that airport in South Africa, it made me think of Lukla.
Lukla, yeah.
Seeing these planes, when you're already in Lukla and you land and you're safe, then you can look back and see these planes essentially just flying off the edge of the world, because everything around is a higher peak, and it just gets higher and higher and higher. But on the way to Everest Base Camp, just like you were saying, such amazement and awe-striking nature around you. I just felt smaller and smaller. And
yeah, that's exactly what it is. You feel very small, and that's great.
It really is great. And, it in a lot of ways, I felt like it was freeing, where just going back to the book you were mentioning, where you check your ego at the door, that's what it felt like. You walk into the Himalayas with all these problems, and you think things are so big around you that you matter so much and everything has such an importance. And by the time we actually got to base camp, I felt like nothing that I was worried about before actually mattered. Look around and see how small you really are. And it gives you perspective. And that was the most amazing thing, besides the absolutely gorgeous sights around you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a video on YouTube you can actually relate to as well. It's called The Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan. You must have seen it.
I've seen it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's exactly what the feeling is, like you really feel how insignificant our problems are, like when you're amidst of this great nature, because in that video, it keeps on zooming out of Earth until the Earth becomes a dot, right? And I think the feeling I felt at the time, when I was in the Himalayas, was something that is relatable to that. It really makes you feel humble, makes you feel tiny like an ant, and that feels great.
Yeah, I mean, you must be kind of familiar with that feeling, sitting in the cockpit, being able to see at such, a high altitude, so much around you, understanding that you really are just a small piece in this big puzzle. So that to me is another reason that I travel, for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of the view from the cockpit, when I was working my previous job, we were going to LAX, Los Angeles, and when we go from the Middle East to Los Angeles, the shortest route is actually via the North Pole. So it looks like a curve on the world map, but it's actually a straight line. So I was lucky enough to see the North Pole from the sky as well. It's just a complete whiteout. It's just white desert. And also the best part is we were flying, I think it was on the way, it was at night. And it was close to winter, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember which month it was, but the aurora was there, the aurora borealis, and all the passengers were asleep, and the captain called us individually to the flight deck and showed us, because you can actually see it from the window of the cabin as well, but it's not panoramic, just like in the cockpit. So it was also another shocking experience for me. It was the first time I've seen the aurora borealis. It's like a ghost, it's just floating. It's like green and purple, and it's just like dancing light, and it's just floating. It's very ghost-like. It was really something. I took some pictures, but the pictures did not do any justice to the real thing.
I went chasing the aurora last year, and I came up empty-handed. So to see it from the flight deck of a international airliner, that's something that you never forget, I'm sure.
No, yeah, it was a highlight of my life for sure. But I want to go to Finland to see the aurora again. It's really something. I think it's the most magical natural phenomena ever. Nothing can top that.
No, definitely. And going back to what you were talking about in the Cape, I actually did that route by air, Durban back to Cape Town, and I still remember how rough the turbulence was. And I'm sure as a pilot, that's part of all in a day's work, right? But between the mountains and between the air masses colliding, it was a bumpy flight coming in. Plus, you see Table Mountain there as well, and you see all those mountains around. And you think, well, there isn't much margin for error in terms of when you're coming into Cape Town. But
Yeah, I think closer to Cape Town, it must have gotten quite turbulent. Hey, I mean, that area is actually called the Cape of Storms with good reason.
right, no,
Yeah,
precisely. But
yeah.
so in that region, you've got shark diving, you've got Stellenbosch, you got everything in between. Just give us a quick roundup of Western Cape, and obviously the town that you mentioned where you spent the most time you really enjoyed. But what else did you see there that you liked, and any adventure tips? Obviously, the Drakensbergs are gorgeous, quite a bit to see and do. But what would you recommend to somebody who's only there for a few days or a week, even?
Yeah, the region I was in of the Western Cape is called the Overberg region. It's a district. So that's where the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean meet. So you can actually go to the border of two oceans. Just like they show in the pictures and the videos, I didn't see that line. I think that's not true. You know, like they say there are two distinct colors and it's not mixing. I think that's not really true because I've been to that border hundreds of times, even by air, even by land, and I never saw it. But they've got that place where the Indian and the Atlantic Ocean meets, and also there's another coastal town towards the east called Mossel Bay, east of Cape Town, that is. So they've got a great zip line. I think they've got the longest over ocean zip line in the world. I think it's about 1.1 Ks. It's really something. It's definitely highly recommended, and they've got shark cage diving there. And apart from that, they've got crocodile cage diving as well. But that's inland. There's a town called Oudtshoorn. So it's an area called the Little Desert. Groot is how they call it. So they've got crocodile cage diving as well, which is really something. And a lot of adventure. They've got so many national parks, and they've got so many trails, running trails, motorcycle trails, and bicycle trails, mountain biking trails, and also the Stellenbosch you mentioned. You know, like I think South Africa produces some of the finest wines in the world, and Stellenbosch is actually known for producing one of the best wines in the world. It's a beautiful wine town. Yeah, and also the whole farming thing, you know, like the people are so, I think it's pretty much like in the US as well. You know, like it's a very farm-oriented place. I don't think it's the same thing in Johannesburg, but the Western Cape is definitely, probably Gauteng as well. Yeah, and it's not just about the country per se, it's also about the people. They're very friendly and they're very adventurous. Like you can actually sense that adventure gene in South Africans naturally. And they've got a crazy barbecue culture which is called braai there. Yeah, and you get a lot of animals and stuff. Definitely not animals in the city, but I was not in the city, and you get a lot of snakes in the summer. I've had a close encounter with a very dangerous snake. When we were braaiing next to a dam, and the snake is a type of viper called a puff adder, and it was literally about a meter behind me and a half a meter behind one of my closest friends there, and it just hissed. It was just passing by. It was just warning, "Hey guys, I'm just passing by. Just relax. Let me do my thing. You have your, you do your own thing. No problem. I'm just passing by." So the hiss itself, you know, got us shocked, and my friend who was the closest to the snake, he actually rolled backwards down the hill over the grill and the ice bucket and everything. Yeah, and my landlord, the first landlord, she was actually walking barefoot at night, and she actually stepped on one and got bitten as well. I could only imagine what that feeling must have been like. You know, you walk barefoot at night and suddenly you step on something rubbery, and you know you messed up. Yeah.
Oh no, that's well for all our snake lovers out there. Just be careful in various places. But now, one thing that really stood out to me in Australia, in South Africa as well, were the game meats. So zebra, gazelle, so many different exotic meats and game farms there. And if you're a vegetarian, you know, apologies in advance, but there's quite a multitude of food items that you won't find in other parts of the world.
I think South Africa is definitely very big on their meat, and especially braai and the types of meat products that they have. Like the really popular meat product they've got is called boerewors, which is like a sausage. Their food is definitely predominantly meat for sure. But yeah, it's not like, vegetarians can't survive there. I'm pretty sure there are vegetarians in the country, and I've got many South African friends who are actually vegan. So I don't think it's going to be a problem in the modern day and age. Everyone's got options everywhere. But traditionally, I think their diet is predominantly meat oriented for sure. And they've got nice desserts as well. Actually, they've got a dessert called malva pudding. I actually call it my South African death, because I got addicted to that, and it was really good. Like it was like heaven on a dish type of thing. So I was convinced that was what was going to kill me in South Africa, but it didn't. And the chances are, like when you walk into certain restaurants in South Africa, with the meal, they just give you a free bottle of wine as well, which is nice. Yeah, I've been to a few in Gauteng, in Johannesburg, and they did that. Maybe it's I don't know if it's like a standard, but certainly some restaurants do that. And when I say wine, it's actually good wine.
No, definitely. And you were mentioning the braai, which is a very important communal event as well.
Yeah,
because
it's a bonding thing. It's embedded in their culture. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And pap on the side, which is kind of a stone
that's
ground,
mashed maize meal type of thing. Yeah,
precisely. Kind of like grits here in the South.
And
Gullah cuisine in the southern seaboard here in the U.S. A lot of parallels as well. So now there's so much to see and do there. It's hard to put a lid on it, because South Africa, it's so vast, and as you mentioned, we haven't even talked about really KwaZulu Natal and Eswatini. They're basically two micro kingdoms that are embedded within South Africa that are still monarchical. But yes, I was just wondering if you had the opportunity to visit Swaziland or Lesotho.
Not really. Lesotho is definitely one of the places I really want to go to. That's where the actual Drakensberg is, actually. It's in Lesotho. Yeah, it's a little country within, and they've got the highest bar in all of Africa as well, and they've got ski resorts, and it snows heavily in Lesotho in winter. It's definitely one of the places I need to go to. I went around it on the way to Port St. John's in the east. I got a glimpse of it, but definitely I have to set my foot there for sure. Lesotho is a special place, that's what they say, and it's very high land. Definitely, like I said, like my experience in South Africa within the 2 years is just I don't know, flash in the pan type of thing, like, because there's so much. I experienced a lot in South Africa, but that's still too less, because that country has so much more to offer. So definitely I'd like to go to Mpumalanga and all those northern places, explore Gauteng better, and the Northwest, all these places, Kimberley, where all the diamonds and everything come from, and all those places. They're big on mining as well. I'd really like to. I think they've got the deepest mine in the world, if I'm not mistaken. So I really want to go see so many places. It's definitely one of the places. My only regret is that I've never seen a hippo in my life, and I still couldn't see one when I was in South Africa. So that's definitely one of the minor reasons I have to go back to as well. And then just another funny story, when I was there, they've got crocodile farming as well. So there's another neighboring town called Bonnievale, which is a crocodile farm, and for some reason, about hundreds of crocodiles got escaped, like they actually went into the river, which is called the Breeder River, and the river actually was closed down for the public because it was infested with crocs, because you don't get crocs in the Western Cape. You don't get big cats. You don't get crocodiles and like known crocodiles, and they had to close the river for the public because it got infested with crocs. I don't know how they cleared that mess, but these are South African stuff, like it was a breath of fresh air for me, because it's also the country life effect, like some of the problems that they've got is not as complicated as they are for us in the city. They've like, what my problem was when I was in South. So the Longaberg, the mountain that I told you, the town that I lived in was under. So I always go to that mountain. There's a nature reserve there, and there are little cliffs and nice biking trails and everything. So I go there running as well, and every time I go there, I walk with a stick for my protection because the place is infested with baboons, and they could be quite nasty, eh? And my life's biggest problem there during my stay was getting chased by baboons. I mean, how cool is that? Not about this financial, like this and that. It was just very straightforward issues.
I would not have guessed that at all.
Yeah, it was really cool. Now that I look back at it, I mean, at the time it was scary, but all bad experiences in time become good experiences.
No, indeed, and to your hippo point, I saw a hippo in Kruger actually at night on a night safari, walking out of I guess it was a kind of a river, maybe it was a lake or a pond. And what was interesting about that is that apparently hippos are the most dangerous animals on the savannah.
Super
more
aggressive.
So than elephants or any. I mean, of course, you think big cats, but apparently they charge, and they're extremely protective of their territory, especially any young that they may be around.
Yeah, that's what my friends told me as well. I don't think you can outrun them. I mean, they're heavy animals, but they can run really fast as well. Once they gain momentum, I think you might as well just close your eyes and come to terms with it. And I think they've got one of the highest bite forces in the world as well, if not the highest bite force. Because, I mean, they've got, just like crocs, they've got like a mouth all over their face. Like, yeah.
The bite force is definitely is incredibly magnified. No, you're exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, it's basic physics, like leverage.
No, for sure. Well, it has come time for our signature lightning round where we ask 10 questions, and just the first thing that comes to mind, if you don't mind. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So one wish, what would it be?
Travel related or personal?
Could be either or both.
Travel related, definitely. I want to explore Scandinavia. Been there a few times, but I haven't really explored it. They were brief visits. Personal, I wish I was an astronaut.
Says the international aviator.
Yeah, that's not an astronaut yet. So
Touche. All right.
Halfway up the ladder.
Okay, that answer definitely takes the cake so far. You kind of answered this in the last just now, but country you want to visit the most and why? I'm assuming it's in Scandinavia somewhere.
Yeah, well, I want to definitely explore Scandinavia, but also more of Japan for sure. Yeah.
No, okay, there's quite a bit to see there, and all the different islands, as you alluded to earlier as well.
Yeah.
What's one thing you still really want to do in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, like I said, I want to explore more about the history of the country and also about the natural, because I'm crazy about water for some reason. I really want to explore more about the natural, the river basins that we've got. I think we've got 103 river basins in the country. I really want to go to the sources of these places. I don't think every place is accessible, but I want to find them out as much as I can. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. What's the strangest thing you've eaten?
Off the top of my head, I think it would be the black egg of Hakone, Japan. That is boiled in the... Have you heard about it?
I have, but remind us because it's been a while.
Yeah, so it's in a place called Hakone. The area is called Hakone, but the place is called Owakudani, I think, which translates to volcanic basin or hot valley or something like that. So the egg is actually
hot springs around there. Yeah.
Yeah, so the egg is actually boiled in the hot springs, which has got a sulfur base. So the egg actually the shell turns out jet black. and becomes very smelly and salty as well. And the traditional Japanese people believe that one egg would expand your life by 7 years. I had 3, so I've got 21 years extra now.
You're just racking them up. You got to have one of those every 5 years. Power back up, huh? What's your favorite thing about Sri Lanka?
Definitely the mountain, the hill country. It's definitely something. I really like that.
No, very good. And in terms of a must-see attraction in Lanka, what would you point people towards?
So I'm really biased when I answer this question because I would recommend the people to see what I would like to see. Like for an example, if a person who loved beaches, they would definitely say beaches and that. But I would say, according to my taste, and I would say the history and the natural beauty of the country and the national parks, because it's more accessible because everything is within the confines of a smaller area. So like they even say that leopard sightings are much easier in Sri Lanka than in all of Africa because of the confines of the national parks. So I mean, most types of climates can be driven to within 5 hours, except for snow. So that's the advantage of Sri Lanka, I think.
No, definitely, and that was one thing that I regret is not getting to the southeast, which has the highest or one of the highest incidents of leopard sightings, right? Kind of off the
Yala National Park. That's where it becomes like morning rush hour traffic, and the leopards don't care at all because they're so accustomed to vehicles. They're like, I might as well act like I'm something.
Photogenic, of course.
Yeah.
One tip you have for travelers.
Yeah, I think it's a timely concern that, a lot of people, more and more people are getting into travel because, I mean, travel has become more accessible to people with, like lower costs and everything, Airbnbs and this and that and cheap flight tickets and all that stuff. I think we should really take it up as our personal responsibility to become more responsible travelers. I think when you say responsible travelers, I don't, it doesn't mean that you have to join Greenpeace or whatever, like, I think it's all about keeping your own personal conduct in check. And that's the most sustainable way, I think, done in large numbers. And that's the most effective and sustainable way because we have to respect our host. It's simple as that. I mean, it boils down to very basic mannerisms that our mothers and fathers used to teach us.
Oh, indeed. And you're exactly right. And we touched on this a little bit at the beginning of the episode, but what motivates you to travel?
Yeah, I think it's the difference. Because planet Earth has so much to offer. Even the landscapes are different from place to place. The people are different. The animals are different. Even the trees are different. The leaves look different. The climate, everything. And that difference is what travel is all about. I mean, what's the point of me leaving here and finding some other place just like Sri Lanka, exactly the same? Like, why would I travel in the first place then? It's exactly that difference and diversity is what really motivates anyone, for that matter. I think this is just a common answer to any person.
No, definitely, that's a great motivator. And which mode of transportation would you recommend to get around Sri Lanka?
Yeah, the buses, they're quite extensive. Their network is quite good, but they might not be as comfortable, for sure. The trains are good, but like I said, given the size of the country, like you can even hire your own vehicle. The trains are good. I would recommend the trains. But also, I mean, you've definitely got the option of hiring a vehicle with or without a chauffeur for cheap. I mean, it's not that far, like I'm pretty sure even to get a Jaffna, it doesn't take 14 hours anymore. In about 9-10 hours you can. It's funny because actually my friends in South Africa, they actually drove to visit their parents sometimes 15 to 20 hours, and if you do that in Sri Lanka, you'd end up somewhere in the Indian Ocean.
No, exactly. I had a private car take me from Anandapura to Kandy. Anuradhapura, sorry. And I remember stopping off along the way at a roadside eatery, and I think it might have been the hottest curry I've ever had, but it was delicious. So
No, I think, yeah, that's the difference. I think that's the distinct difference between our food and the rest of the South Asian food. It's more than the spices. I think we're just, very heavy on the chili, like, oh, too much.
right. But it was it was great nonetheless. And finally, if there's one moment that you could relive in your life, what would that be?
Many moments, but I think it would be the Himalayas, because that place is mystical. That is the best word I can use to describe that place.
And that's a fantastic way to end the episode. I have a feeling Chris would concur with that. I've seen Everest from afar, from Darjeeling, but I have never been up close the way both of you have. So I can only imagine.
I could talk for days about my experience, and I was only there in the area for about 12 days. But you're right, it's a mystical place, and it's something that I think it takes a lifetime to truly understand, and it offers the best perspective that I've had so far in my life.
Yeah.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up here. Charendra, thanks so much. It was a pleasure talking to you. Really appreciate you coming on. And looking forward to
thanks very much for having
time.
me. Yeah, it was my first time on a podcast, so it's a new experience for me, and I'm all for new experiences. So thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Definitely. We'll have to have you back on when you start your international aviation career properly.
Right. Happily.
Really appreciate it, and it was great meeting you.
Same here,
good luck with the exams and everything. And stay in touch.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
What a conversation, whether it's motorcycling across Sri Lanka or flying adventures over Cape Town and all over the Stellenbosch region. That was an absolutely intriguing conversation, and we hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, just hearing his stories, all of the adventure, he truly lives the dream. That's awesome. And as a fellow motorcycle enthusiast, the fact that he just hopped on his bike and took the trip that he did, it was inspiring. And I really want to make me up my game there. So we appreciate his time and the fact that he was able to shed some light on all of those adventures and talk to us as he did. And guys, we really appreciate you listening. So as always, we would love to hear your feedback. So reach out to us on social media. We're on Facebook. We are on YouTube. We are on Instagram at Locales Unknown. If you're liking what you're hearing, go ahead and follow us. We'll give you some updates. We'll make sure we give you the latest news. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them there, or you can reach us on contact@localesunknown.com. We are accessible wherever you get your podcasts. And again, share the love. If you like what you're hearing so far, go ahead, leave us a review, leave us some comments. We're here for you. And until next time, guys, thanks for listening. As always, we'll talk to you soon.